Kale Arden's world had been reduced to smoke, metal shards, and a sky he didn't recognize. His reconnaissance craft, barely more than a stealth shell and a propulsion core, lay scattered across a ridge of broken stone half a click away, its wreckage still hissing under the humidity of the jungle moon. Vaindar 4. That was the Alliance chart name. But the locals wouldn't have a word for it. Worlds like this weren't mapped, they were survived. The night canopy pulsed with bioluminescent fog, drifting between colossal trees whose trunks were wider than cargo shuttles. The scent of burning thatch hung thick in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of ionized plasma. A scream cut through the darkness, high, feline, and terrified. Kale crouched on a branch 40 meters above the ground, his breath steady, his mind cold. His mission had been observation only. No assists. No rescues. No entanglements. 3 days he had stayed invisible. 3 days he had watched the off-world raiders, armored mercenaries who called themselves collectors, stalk the native tribes. He'd studied their patterns, the way they cloaked themselves in adaptive camouflage, the way they hunted for sport. The collectors weren't subtle. They enjoyed the chase. Below, one of them, massive, encased in composite alloy, buzzing with overclocked servos, was dragging a wounded warrior across the clearing. The native fighter hissed weakly, his claws scraping at the ground. His fur was mottled and striped, tawny and black. The warrior had fought hard. It wasn't enough. Kale's jaw locked. Not my fight. Not my planet. Not my war. Then he saw her. The small hut at the far end of the clearing had begun to collapse under falling embers. A child, a little girl with bright red hair, pointed red feline ears, and a trembling red tail, was trapped behind a woven storage basket, her eyes reflecting the firelight like twin rubies. The collector's targeting laser snapped across the distance, painting a dot on her chest. Kale's discipline didn't just crack, it shattered. He dropped from the canopy, silent as condensation sliding down a blade. The jungle swallowed his movement. A second collector, smaller, a scout class, crept along the perimeter. Its cloak shimmered faintly where the humidity exposed its outline. Kale positioned himself behind a bundle of high-tension vines he'd spent the morning arranging. He waited. The scout walked into the trigger vine. Kale pulled. The counterweight log shot downward in a violent arc. The impact shattered the scout's personal shielding, the sharpened point punching through armor, through flesh, through the tree behind it. The crack echoed across the clearing. The collector didn't even scream. But the others heard it. The leader, its armor painted in jagged patterns like a warning, roared in synthetic fury and swung toward the sound. Kale was already gone, dropping among the roots and shadows. His face and arms were smeared with sulfuric mud to mask his heat signature. He moved like smoke. Another collector, heavily armed, unleashed a barrage of plasma toward a lone warrior who fought desperately with twin obsidian blades. She was fast, faster than any human he'd ever seen. Her muscles rippled under charcoal-striped skin. Her movements were whip-sharp, feral, beautifully controlled. And her hair, long, wild, blood-red, glowed like fire in the chaos. Her red ears flattened, her red tail lashing as she dodged a blast that vaporized a tree stump. Kale slipped behind the heavy gunner, jammed a micro-tool against the mercenary's neck seam, and ripped free its power conduit. The armor seized instantly. Frozen. Paralyzed. Kale vanished again before the mercenary could fall. The red-haired warrior, he'd learn her name later, Ryla Vess, spun, trying to locate the invisible ally who was saving her people one shadow at a time. The leader noticed her distraction and charged. Ryla braced herself, lifting her twin spears. Their obsidian edges glinted in the flames. She was tenacious. Fierce. But the leader's shield flared, and her first strike shattered against it. His backhand sent her crashing into the dirt. Kale moved. Dropping from a high branch, he slammed an overcharged power cell, stolen from the immobilized gunner, onto the leader's shield generator. The resulting energy feedback erupted like a sunburst. The shockwave flung Kale across the clearing, slamming him into a bundle of roots. His ears rang. His ribs screamed. When he pushed himself upright, the collector leader was a molten heap of steaming armor. Silence rolled through the village. Smoke curled upward. Embers drifted like fireflies. Warriors emerged from hiding, their eyes wide with disbelief. Kale stood, chest heaving, blade drawn, but the fight was done. Ryla rose slowly from the dirt, her red hair plastered to her cheek with sweat, her red tail flicking in slow, predatory study. She looked at the ruined bodies of the collectors. Then she looked at him. Her gaze traveled over his shoulders, down his arms, lingering on the blood and mud smeared across his hands. She stepped toward him with a hunter's focus. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and resonant. You. She placed the razor-sharp point of her spear against his sternum, not piercing, only claiming. Her warriors circled. None raised a weapon at him. Instead they bowed their heads, to her. An elder approached and translated, his tone grim. The huntress Ryla Vess, daughter of Chieftain Taver, invokes the blood savior bond. By law, the one who saves the heir becomes hers. Kale blinked. I didn't agree to anything. The elder's expression didn't change. You have no choice. Ryla's red ears twitched, her eyes never leaving him. Her spear tip pressed harder against his chest. The villagers watched in reverent silence. You belong to her now, the elder said. Kale's pulse hammered. 20 armed warriors around him. His sidearm dead. His knife worthless. He was injured, exhausted, and trapped in a culture he didn't understand. His options collapsed into one. Compliance. He slowly drew his pistol and blade and surrendered them. The weapons were taken from him with ceremonial gravity. Ryla stepped closer, so close the heat of her breath brushed his cheek. She placed her hand firmly on his shoulder, her fingers gripping with territorial certainty. Her claim was absolute. Kale Arden, ghost operative of the Alliance, had just saved a village. And lost his freedom. Forever. They marched Kale through the wreckage like a trophy that couldn't decide if it was enemy or miracle. Smoke still clung to the air, drifting in ribbons between charred support poles and half-collapsed roofs. Wherever he looked he saw stunned eyes, soot-streaked faces, children clutching elders, warriors standing guard with weapons still trembling in their hands. And every gaze slid from him almost immediately, to her. To Ryla. Her red hair was a blazing banner against the gray haze, wild strands catching embers of light as she walked. Her red ears were pricked forward, listening for any hint of threat. Her red tail swayed with a slow, controlled confidence, broadcasting to everyone that this human ghost, this stranger, was no longer an unknown. He was claimed. The largest structure in the village loomed ahead, its frame built from dark timber and plated with thick hides resistant to fire. The Long House. Even without understanding their language, Kale could feel the weight of authority around it, like a gravity well in the middle of the settlement. Guards parted for Ryla without a word. Inside, the smoky light from a central fire painted the carved posts in flickering gold. Taver, chieftain of the Redclaw tribe, waited there, a massive figure with scars like pale rivers across his dark skin. His tail, darker red than his daughter's, flicked once when Kale entered. The elder translator stood at his side. Ryla didn't kneel, didn't bow. She simply spoke, her tone calm and absolute. The elder's voice followed in rough Alliance standard a moment later. She says, you fell from the sky. You killed 3 collectors. You saved the bloodline. The blood savior bond is invoked. Kale straightened instinctively, old training pulling his shoulders back, chin up. With respect, he said, I was only trying to keep your people alive. I'll take my gear, repair what I can, and leave your territory. I'm not a threat. The elder translated. Tavor didn't look at Kale. He watched his daughter instead, the way her hand stayed clamped on Kale's shoulder, fingers digging into his muscle, not painfully, but with a possessive pressure that promised she could hurt him if she wished. You know the law, Tavor rumbled at Ryla. I do, she answered. You accept the price? Ryla's red ears tilted back, just a fraction, a subtle signal of defiance and certainty. I do. The elder finally turned to Kale, eyes tired, voice solemn. The blood savior bond is the oldest law. You saved the heir. Your life is the price. You belong to the one you saved. Kale felt the words land like cold metal plates being bolted onto his chest. Belong, he repeated, as if tasting something rotten. You're saying I'm property? The elder didn't flinch. Yes. Ryla slid closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her body along his arm, smell the faint mix of smoke and wild herbs in her fur. Her hand tightened on his shoulder as if just in case he'd try something stupid like break free and sprint out of the door. He did the math anyway, distance, angles, number of warriors, his injuries, the useless state of his sidearm. Every calculation ended in the same place, dead, or worse, someone else slaughtered because he panicked. So he smiled, a thin, humorless line. Then I guess I'm a very expensive pet, he muttered. The elder translated. Several warriors hissed, offended. Tavor's expression didn't change, but his tail flicked sharply. Ryla, though, just let out a low, amused purr. He makes light when trapped, she said softly. She says you joke in a cage, the elder told him. She finds this interesting. That was how Kale Arden, who once ghosted through war zones without leaving footprints, was escorted out of the long house as if he were a valuable artifact. Not bound, not chained, just locked in place by the knowledge that one wrong move would turn this fragile village into a battlefield again. Ryla's dwelling sat a little apart from the others, built from darker timber, reinforced at every joint. When they pushed him inside and pulled the hide flap closed behind them, the world shrank to dim firelight, thick warmth, and her. The hut smelled of wood smoke, dried meat, sharp medicinal herbs, and her own scent, something wild and feline and undeniably alive. Weapons lined one wall, spears with polished obsidian tips, recurved bows, knives fitted into bone handles. This wasn't a prison cell. It was a hunter's den. Ryla stood in the center of it, watching him with open curiosity, red tail curling lazily behind her like a question mark. You move like shadow, she said in her own tongue, the elder's translations from earlier still echoing in Kale's memory. But you bleed like anyone else. She stepped closer and grabbed his injured forearm without warning. Pain flashed up the limb, white-hot where plasma had nearly cooked the muscle. Kale flinched, instinct making him tense to break her grip. Her fingers tightened instantly, claws just grazing his skin, and a low growl rumbled up from her chest. Every survival instinct he had screamed. There was something ancient about that sound. It wasn't civilized. It bypassed language and training, going straight to the part of his brain that remembered humanity used to be prey. He forced himself to relax. Only then did she ease her hold, turning his arm in the firelight to examine the damage. She clicked her tongue, displeased, then strode to a shelf, snatching up a wooden bowl filled with a pungent green paste. She came back and smeared it over the burn with firm, careless fingers. The salve burned cold-hot, like someone had poured liquid electricity onto his nerves. Kale clenched his jaw, refusing to make a sound. He'd been trained to endure worse in Alliance Black Ops programs, but there was something about her doing it, about her eyes calmly studying his reactions, that made every twitch feel like losing ground. When she finished, she pushed his arm away without ceremony, then plucked a skewer of roasted meat from a hot stone near the fire. She tore off a piece with her teeth, then held the skewer toward him. The message was clear. Eat. Kale stared at the meat, at the hand holding it out. He should refuse on principle alone. He was a soldier, an operative, not a domesticated animal to be hand-fed by its owner. The fire crackled. His stomach cramped, reminding him he'd been living on ration bars and adrenaline for days. Slowly, with a quiet, murderous frustration aimed entirely at himself, he took the meat from her hand. Something flickered at the corner of her mouth. Not a full smile. More like the satisfied curl of lips of someone who just watched a puzzle piece snap into place. She ate her own portion, never taking her eyes off him. When she finished, she pointed with her spear but toward a pile of thick furs near the entrance. "Your den," she said in halting standard, clearly proud of the word. Then, without any sign that she considered this awkward or provocative, she turned away and began unstrapping the pieces of armor that protected her shoulders, chest, and forearms. Leather dropped softly onto the packed earth floor. Underneath, she was covered only by simple wrap garments, practical and minimal, her red hair cascading down her back like a living flame. She lay down on the raised platform at the far side of the hut, on a bed of the softest pale pelts, and closed her eyes. She wasn't asleep. Kale knew the difference. This was a predator's stillness, a listening stillness. He sat on the furs assigned to him, feeling them swallow his weight. They were warm, comfortable, and utterly suffocating. He catalogued exits, structural weak points, patrol patterns he'd noticed outside. Every attempt to plan an escape ran straight into the same wall, her days blurred. His arm healed quickly under her nightly application of that caustic green salve. She woke him with a word or a nudge of her foot, fed him what she ate, walked with him through the village exactly 2 steps behind and to her left. A position, he realized, that was both honor and ownership in this culture. He hated how easy it became to fall into the rhythm. Ryla took him on hunting patrols, her elite warriors watching him with a mix of awe and thinly veiled resentment. On one patrol, she pointed at a 6-legged, plated boar rooting in the mud and leaned close, her whiskers almost brushing his cheek. "Show me ghost," she whispered. He shouldn't have enjoyed the chance to move again, to do something. But as he slipped into the jungle undergrowth, every muscle waking up in anticipation, he realized he did. He circled downwind, climbed silently into the canopy, waited for the perfect moment, then dropped like a stone and drove an obsidian blade into the soft articulation behind the beast's armored skull. Clean. Efficient. Silent. When he looked up, breath coming in slow, controlled pulls, Ryla was leaning against a tree, arms folded, red tail curling in slow delight. She wasn't watching the carcass. She was watching him. "Good," she purred, stepping close, the back of her clawed fingers brushing down the front of his tunic, over his chest. "Very good. Mine." His hand twitched toward her wrist. He didn't take it. He didn't move at all. That was when the horn sounded. A long, low, shuddering note rolled through the jungle, carried on the humid air. Ryla's posture changed instantly, relaxed owner melting away, the huntress snapping back into place. She grabbed Kale's arm, pulling him along without asking, without explaining. They ran. By the time they reached the village edge, Kale could already hear the new gunfire, different cadence, different intention. He dragged free of Ryla's grip and ducked into the shadows of a fallen trunk, eyes scanning. Collectors again. But now their plasma shots tracked high, hitting rooftops and empty walkways. Their real weapons were something else, crackling nets, tranquilizer darts, stun batons that dropped warriors where they stood without killing them. Ryla screamed a name, one of her lieutenants, as he went down in a burst of shimmering energy mesh. Kale's blood went cold. "This isn't a raid," he said under his breath. "This is procurement." In that moment, with smoke rising and Ryla's red hair whipping around her like a scarlet halo of fury, Kale Arden understood something that made his stomach twist. The collectors weren't here for trophies anymore. They were here for samples. The council fire in Tavor's longhouse burned low, but the heat inside was fierce, fear, fury, humiliation condensed into a single suffocating room. Warriors paced like caged beasts, their claws tapping impatient rhythms on the wooden floor. Ryla stood perfectly still, her red tail coiled tight, her red ears pinned flat, her face carved from stone. Only her eyes moved, flicking to Kale as he spoke. "This wasn't a hunt," Kale said calmly, his words translated by the elder in sharp, clipped tones. "It was a collection run. They targeted your strongest. They left your elders. They left the young. That's not war. That's inventory." A growl rippled through the room. Taver leaned forward, massive hands braced against the carved table. "Ghost man," he rumbled, "for what purpose would anyone take my warriors alive?" Kale pointed to the scorched sky visible through the smoke hole above. "Because someone pays for them. Someone off-world wants your people not dead, but duplicated." Whispers cut like knives between the warriors. Dread spread in their eyes, slow, heavy, inevitable. Ryla did not whisper. Her voice was low and lethal. "They want to make Redclaw warriors. Not just make," Kale said. "Improve. Weaponize. Breed. Manufacture." The word manufacture sent a visible shiver through her body, not of fear, but of rage so ancient and instinctive it looked like her bones might crack under it. Her red hair bristled like fire, glowing under the torchlight. "They would take our hunt," she whispered. "Our birthright. Our spirit. Turn it into copies." She turned her gaze slowly to Kale, her eyes going cold as dusk. "You think like they do. You will track them. Not a question. Not a request. A command." Kale swallowed it with a steady nod. "Then we plan." The long house emptied quickly, warriors gathering supplies, sharpening blades, preparing for a battle that would not come to their territory but to enemy ground. Soon only Ryla and Kale remained by the dying fire. She knelt and dragged a claw across the packed dirt, sketching out a detailed map of the canyon region, ridges, choke points, and deep scars carved by ancient tectonic wounds. Kale knelt across from her. Their hands nearly touched over the crude lines. The dropship flew this direction. Kale pointed to a cluster of deep canyons. Barren terrain. No vegetation. Perfect for a concealed facility. Ryla nodded. "The place where the earth bleeds." Her claw traced a winding line. "There. A path only vipers use." "A cave system," Kale murmured. "Unmapped. Narrow. The collectors won't guard it." She looked up at him, eyes glinting. "You would have chosen the ridge. Loud path. Rockslide path. You think like storm. I think like shadow." He almost smiled. "You get us in quietly. I get us out violently." She bared her teeth, not hostile, but pleased. Preparations began at dawn. Kale taught the Red Claw elite how to sabotage collector tech using what scraps he'd salvaged. He held up a fist-sized power cell, rigged with a volatile crosswire. "This pulse will fry their armor," he explained. "Freeze their weapons. 5 seconds of paralysis. That's all you need." Ryla watched him like a hawk, her red ears angled forward, absorbing every nuance. When he finished, she stepped forward silently and plucked the power cell from his palm. "And we have something of our own," she said. She led him deep into the jungle to a twisted tree dripping thick black resin. Its sap oozed onto the bark in veined rivulets. She dipped her obsidian blade into it. The sap sizzled like acid. Then she pressed the blade to a chunk of salvaged collector armor. The resin ate into the synthetic seals, melting the flexible joints even though the alloy plating itself remained intact. Kale's eyes widened. "This dissolves their polymer bindings." Ryla nodded once. "Shadow sap. Used for killing cave beasts in darkness. They cannot scream if their armor melts around them." He exhaled, impressed despite himself. How long does it take to break through their visor seals? Her gaze dropped to his, slow and deliberate. Depends, she murmured, how deep you want the poison to go. The air between them tightened, so palpable Kale had to consciously step back to regain clarity. Good, he said, ignoring the heat rising under his skin. We incorporate it. But there was more to prepare. Kale took Ryla aside for personal combat refinement. You're fast, he told her as they moved into an open clearing. Almost too fast. Her red tail flicked sharply. Too fast, she echoed. For stealth. He stepped behind her, placing his hands lightly on her hips, guiding her stance. You strike to kill. I need you to strike to vanish. She didn't bristle. She leaned into the lesson. Show me, she breathed. He guided her wrist with his own, easing her knife hand into a silent arc. His breath brushed her red ear, making it twitch involuntarily. Together they moved as one shadow, one shape, sliding through the lethal dance of ghost assassination. Slow is smooth, he whispered. Smooth is fast. Ryla shivered under his guidance, not in fear, but in that predatory delight she never hid. Again, she whispered. And again he taught her. By dusk, the bond between them was no longer captive. It wasn't even predator-prey. It was something far more dangerous. Two weapons sharpening each other. The next day brought tension. A warrior named HFY confronted Kale in the middle of the village, shoving him hard. The ghost gives orders now, he snarled. He is not chief. He is prize. Kale moved to defend himself, but Ryla blurred forward faster than he could blink. Her obsidian blade locked under HFY's jaw. You will obey his voice, she hissed, as you obey mine. Or I will feed your eyes to the duskfangs. HFY dropped to his knees. The challenge was dead before Kale could speak. That night, Ryla sat cross-legged on her platform, watching Kale clean the shadow sap from his fingers. You are not Ghost, she said quietly. Ghost is Echo. Without body. She tilted her head, flames glinting in her red hair. You are Shadow. Shadow moves with its hunter. Sharp. Cold. Follows where the hunt goes. He looked up. And? Her lips curved. And it fits me. They left at dawn. The cave mouth was a black wound in the canyon wall, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The air inside was cold, metallic. Kale kept one hand lightly against Ryla's lower back, not touching for intimacy but for navigation, silent communication in the pitch dark. He could feel her muscles shift with every step. After an hour, they reached a heavy metal grate, a ventilation shaft. Kale knelt, microtool in hand. This is it. The lock clicked open. They entered a sterile maintenance corridor bathed in faint white light. A collector guard stood ahead, unaware. Ryla didn't wait for permission. She glided forward, silent, fluid, deadly. She touched her shadow sap, coated blade to the neck seal of the armor. The guard stiffened a fraction too late. She lowered him gently, soundless, her red tail curling in silent triumph. Kale felt a strange surge in his chest. Pride. They pressed on. When the final door hissed open, they stepped into the heart of the nightmare. Cloning tanks. Genetic diagrams. Rows of stasis pods filled with warriors from tribes Kale had never seen. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Ryla's breath hitched, just once. They steal our spirits, she whispered. No, Kale said, his jaw tight. We're taking them back. They detonated the charges across the lab, forcing alarms to scream. As Kale worked the last override, a heavy clang echoed down the hall. The voice that followed chilled the air. Ghost. It was the collector commander, now inside a towering exoloader suit built for war. You cost me everything. Ryla and Kale exchanged a look, silent, fierce, unified. "Draw his fire," Kale said. Ryla knocked an arrow, its tip coated with shadow sap. "I do more than draw," she growled. The war for her people's future began. The corridor shook as the exoloader came thundering into view, 3 tons of industrial armor twisted into a machine built for war. Sparks cascaded from its limbs as the Collector's commander stepped forward inside the armored shell. His voice, amplified by damaged speakers, rattled the walls like gravel in a drum. "Ghost, you took my command. My honor. My future. I will take your life for payment." The suit's hydraulic claw snapped open. The rotary plasma caster on its shoulder spun up with a rising, murderous whine. Kale grabbed Ryla's wrist. "Go. Get Kale and the others out." Her red ears flattened sharply, her red tail bristling, her voice rising in a harsh growl. "The plan changes. I stay. We kill the metal beast." The exoloader fired. A plasma bolt scorched past Kale's head and vaporized an entire bank of computers in a hiss of white-hot gas. Kale dove behind a reinforced stasis pod, his breath knocked from his lungs. Another shot slammed into a ceiling support beam, sending molten debris raining down. Ryla sprinted sideways, rolling behind a workstation. Her movements were fire and grace, red hair flashing with each dodge. "Ryla!" Kale shouted. "He's targeting movement, don't give him a straight line." She bared her teeth. "I am not prey." The commander roared through the suit's speakers. "Hold still." He swung the hydraulic claw, smashing the workstation she had hidden behind. Ryla rebounded off the wall, her legs coiling for a leap, only to be forced back by a blast of plasma that scorched the floor at her feet. Kale scanned the room. The ventilation shaft was too narrow for the exosuit. The tanks were volatile. The computers would provide cover, but only once. He needed an opening. One mistake, and the suit would crush them both. "Fine," he muttered. "Time to improvise." He pulled his last EMP device from his belt, thumbed the trigger cover open, then slid out from behind the stasis pod. He sprinted. Ryla froze, eyes widening. "Kale!" The suit rotated toward the motion instantly, plasma cannon tracking him with cold precision. Kale dove under one of the surgical tables just as a plasma blast turned the table's top into a molten sheet of metal. "Come out," the commander bellowed. "Sure," Kale muttered, "come and get me." He hurled the EMP not at the suit, but beneath it, sliding it across the floor like a puck. It skittered to a stop between the exoloader's feet. The commander didn't notice. Kale pressed the detonator. The pulse exploded in a sphere of crackling blue light. The exosuit seized, limbs locking, lights flickering. Servos screamed in protest. "Now!" Kale shouted. Ryla was already in motion. She leapt onto a toppled stasis tank and sprang upward in a single fluid surge. Her red hair streamed behind her like a comet tail. She landed on the shoulder of the exosuit, claws gripping into the cracked plating. She slammed 2 shadow sap-coated arrows into the suit's joints, one at the elbow, one at the knee. The metal hissed, spat, began to melt. The EMP faded. The suit rebooted. Slowly. Too slowly. The commander roared. "Get OFF." He swung a massive arm to smash her. Ryla released one hand, hung by her claws alone, then vaulted up to the canopy. Her knife flashed black with sap. She drove it into the armor seal around the cockpit window. The resin sizzled, eating the polymer. Cracks spidered through the canopy. Kale jumped onto a raised platform, grabbed a metal conduit, and swung down, kicking the weakened canopy with both boots. It shattered. The commander inside screamed, reaching for a backup weapon, but Ryla was faster. She tore open the canopy, seized him by his harness, and yanked him out of the seat like ripping the heart out of a beast. He fell to the floor, scrambling. Wait, he choked. Ryla landed in front of him, blade in hand, red ears angled forward like daggers, red tail lashing. There is no waiting, she said, voice low and final. She drove the obsidian blade through his throat. The sound was simple. Clean. Final. Silence followed. Only the beeping of Kale's charges, almost ready to blow, filled the air. Kale. Ryla called. Her second-in-command, groggy but upright, rushed forward with two other freed warriors. He bowed to her, then to Kale. Out, Kale ordered. We have 90 seconds. They ran into the tunnels, dragging freed warriors along the narrow paths. The base behind them shook as systems failed, red lights flashing down the corridor. Kale glanced at the far wall as he ran, and froze for half a second. His wrist communicator was blinking. Green. Alliance rescue beacon. Reactivated by the collector facility's automated distress signal. He swallowed hard. Home. Command. Debriefing. Debriefing meant isolation, reassignment, decontamination, and every detail of this mission ripped out of his hands. Maybe even wiped. The path ahead split, one tunnel to the ridge, another back to open ground. Ryla was already ahead, turning back to look at him, eyes bright in the dim blue of the emergency lights. Her chest rose and fell with exhaustion and fury. Her red hair was matted with sweat, her red tail flicking once, slow and deliberate. You come, she said simply. Not a command. Not possession. Not anymore. Just truth. He followed. They emerged onto the canyon ridge as dawn spread across the sky, painting the world in muted gold. Behind them, the collector base exploded in a plume of fire and collapsing steel. Warriors cheered weakly, clinging to each other in relief. Kale didn't cheer. The green light on his wrist blinked insistently. 48 hours until Alliance ships arrived to retrieve him. Ryla stepped in front of him, expression unreadable. She lifted one hand to his chest, touching the spot where, days ago, she had first claimed him. Her fingers pressed gently. The bond is broken, she said. The elder translated softly, the debt is paid. You are free, Kale. She used his name. For the first time. Then she turned and began walking back toward the village, her hunters falling in behind her. Kale supported the wounded. The tribe moved like a tide. Ryla didn't look back. She didn't have to. Kale stared at the blinking green light. Home. A life of sterilized corridors, debrief rooms, missions decided by others. He remembered Ryla's hand on his chest. Her voice in the darkness. Her learning his shadow kill. Her fury at the thought of her people becoming copies. Her red hair glowing under firelight. He unclasped the communicator. He held it for a long moment. Then he smashed it against the canyon rock. The light died with a soft, pathetic flicker. Kale breathed out. Long and slow. He walked. Not running. Not rushing. Just walking. When he reached her, he didn't reach for her hand. He didn't need to. He simply fell into step beside her. Ryla looked at him, lips curling, not in triumph, but in welcome. They walked into the rising sun together. So that brings us to the end of Kale and Ryla's story, at least for now. We started with a lone scout stranded on a forgotten moon and ended with two warriors choosing each other over the paths they were born into. It's messy, dangerous, and absolutely not the ending anyone expected, including them. Kale found something in the Redclaw tribe he never found in the Alliance, a place where instinct and honor mattered more than protocol, and where loyalty wasn't assigned, it was earned. And Ryla, fierce and unrelenting, finally met someone who could stand beside her without breaking, or bending, or running from the weight she carried. Their war isn't over. The collectors aren't the only force in the galaxy hungry for power, and the Alliance won't stay ignorant forever. But for now, they walk forward together, Hunter and Shadow, toward a future that neither of them could have imagined. If you enjoyed this story and want more worlds, more battles, and more unlikely alliances, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep making these long, cinematic narratives for you. If you liked this chapter specifically, the infiltration, the bond, the final choice, go ahead and hit that like button so the algorithm knows you want more sci-fi epics with heart. And of course, if you know someone who loves alien cultures, tactical combat, or slow burn connections forged through war, don't keep this to yourself, share the video with them and pull them into the universe with us. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.